Got you another one coming at you live from the 210 Design Shop. We're gonna run the 4 EMF Ghost Series 8-inch subs, single voice coil, and a sealed enclosure. This goes in the back of a 2005 Chevy Duramax. I think so. Anyway, we got the all pieces cut up. We're gonna go with 1/2-inch material because, like I said, truck boxes, airspace is your enemy. Here I am marking off, like I told you in the last video, marking off the 1/2-inch all the way around. That way my screw holes won't miss. It makes it a lot easier. That's what I'm doing here on this piece. Now I can get ready to apply, say it with me, 100% glue coverage. Added some clamps. I used a couple of small toolboxes for weight because the clamps outweighed the material and it was flipping. Here I am setting my gauge on my drill for my screws. Screw placement, no more than 6 inches. And at this very angle, when I took this picture, I realized I just messed up. So I had to take all the screws back out, pry the wood back loose, fill it in with wood filler, which is sawdust and some glue, sanded it back down once it dried. I had changed up the assembly format at home the night before, but did not relay it back to my notes in the shop. So you don't end up doing what I just did. Always double check your notes. But just repeated the steps, doing it the correct way now. And now that we're back on track, let's continue. I usually space my screws from the edge about 1.5 inches. Whether it's pre-drilled or not, this will prevent your wood from splitting on your ends, whether you're using 1/2 inch or 3/4. Just a little tip there. Still gapping no more than 6 inches. 4 inches about usually what I hit them at. Here I am just showing you those clean edges. When you clamp them together, you have no gaps before I apply that thin layer of glue on the inside. Now I'm ready to move on to the next step. What I'm doing here is I'm finding the center point of this box. I'm going ahead and mark it down the middle, splitting it into 2 equal halves. And what I'll do, I'm using 1/2 inch material, so I'll mark 1/4 inch on either side of that mark, giving me my 1/2 inch thickness of my material. And I'll repeat this process on either side of this mark, so now I'll have 4 equal quadrants for this box. The way each speaker will have the same amount of airspace. And here I am showing you. Center point, 1/4 on each side. Transfer it to the top and to the back. Quick tape on it, double checking myself. Making sure that the outer sides of each chamber are the same throughout. And once I know that I'm true on that, then I'll get the next piece of wood, line it up in front of it, and I'll transfer those marks onto it, which will actually be, I believe, the front part of the box. This is what this part is. Now I can go ahead and set this piece up, and I use my C-clamps so I can set it up straight, add the glue, and then set the 2 pieces that I already have assembled previously on top of this piece, and then clamp it down, and then I'll be screwing downward, assuring that I don't strip out any screws. This makes it a lot easier. Hit it with a little thin layer of glue to the inside. Now I have 2 twin pieces. Now here I'm going to transfer the inside marks that I did previously, separating each chamber. I'm going to transfer that mark all the way around on the outside of the box. That's, like I said, this will help when you get putting your screws into place, so ensuring that you don't miss. Here I am showing you just that I'm double checking. Each chamber is the same. I may be off maybe a 16th, maybe a 32nd. Tape may have slipped. Pencil may not have been sharp as it was on the previous mark, so don't hold it against me. But they're true. Each chamber is about the same. Now I'll go ahead and start adding glue and add my end pieces to the box. A lot of the steps are just repetitive. You know, clamp, screw, and glue, clamp, screw, and glue. Hit it with a little bead of glue on the inside, and you'll be surprised if you got those, if your edges are true, your edges are clean cut, you will not use or need silicone, even in a sealed box. 100% glue coverage will save you. Well, I'm starting to put the dividers in, separating each chamber. Oh yeah, it's coming along, coming along. Now I'm getting ready to do what I call the sleeper flush trim, where I'm not adding it to the outside, I'm adding it to the inside. And this is the first piece in the beginning where I messed up on and just filled in the holes and sanded them back smooth. That's the piece I used for this. I'm going to go ahead and mark on the outside so I can get ready to get my pivot hole when I start cutting the subwoofer mounts out. Always tap it in with a nail, that way your drill bit does not walk on you when you get to drilling, because it will. Pushed it all the way through with me screwing another piece to the back, so I don't want to make sure that there's nothing protruding out, so I knocked that little burr off with the little sanding block, dry clamp them into place, and then I can follow the original hole and drill it all the way through to the second piece, ensuring that my center points are going to be the same when I take these out and get to cutting these holes out. Double checking my ID and my OD of the subs before I get to cutting that router on. I've got each piece laid out, hit it in a couple spots with my air nailer, as you can see here. Got the one next to the pivot hole just to eliminate, once I finish the cut, it doesn't spin on me. It holds it in place on the table. Do me some cross hashes in there, and I'm doing a couple dry pass scrapes with that router, making sure the cut I'm gonna make is true. And there we go, a few passes later. Each one of them is cut. I'll go ahead and pry the pieces up, set them to the side. Now I'll go ahead and start on the box. Double checking, did a couple dry scrapes first, lowering the bit where it's just scraping a little bit of the wood. Here I'm double checking my depth of my screws. Since it's thin on there, I had to remove some of the ones that were in the way, just so my router wouldn't hit it. I'll replace them later with some modified screws. There's the screws, that should be 1-inch screws here, and those are still too long at certain points. You can see right there, so I'm gonna have to mark them, get them on my grinding wheel, and I'll grind them down to the depth that I need so it does not protrude out of the actual holes that I've cut out through that wood. And then the thing later on, you'll see I didn't even need to do this. I'll let you see that here in a little bit. But screw them back into place. Now we can start adding these sleeper, and I did air quotes, flush trim pieces. Set them into place, took my pencil, outlined it, take them out, that way I know where I need to stop gluing, so I'm not wasting glue. That's the only reason I do that. Smear it on there with my plastic spatula. And if this don't look like the Stonehenge, you better go ask somebody, pick up a history book. The newspaper in between each piece is for gapping. If I was to cut a little bit shy, that roll up a couple pieces of newspaper and wedge it in there just so it presses into place. And I left this like this overnight. Got them all strategically placed just to make sure I got good coverage. Came back the next evening and double checked everything, make sure I didn't have any gaps, which I won't have because of the glue that I already did a complete coverage of that will be mashed between the two pieces. But I'm a stickler for detail, so that's why I went ahead and hit a little bit of thin glue layer around all the inside edges. Had the glue, so why not? Now I'm transferring the marks again to my top piece, I believe now. Yes, to the top piece when I'll be sealing it up. Before I seal it up, I have to do some more modifications to the inside of the box. That should be coming up here shortly. Just want to do a quick weigh-in, 5.5 pounds per sub, just in case you was wondering. Now I pre-drill all my holes for my wire, because I'll be connecting them all together, daisy chaining them in parallel. Just get a drill bit just big enough to the wire pass through to keep it tight as possible. I don't add silicone to them. If you keep it tight enough based on your drill bit diameter, you'll be good to go. Hit it with a layer of glue, and we're going to clamp town, baby. Clamped all in place. I've used my C-clamps on these little thin pieces just to make sure I get an extra good bite. Again, this was useless, pointless later on down the line, but I didn't know this going into it, so. Get that glue to smash on through there. I stagger my screws. I don't put them side by side when you do a double layer. Makes no sense. Check this out. Yeah, that just happened. So, my outer diameter was smaller than what I actually cut it. So what I'm gonna have to do is get creative. Now I know there's bits, get a smaller diameter bearing, put it on your flush trim bit. There's several ways to do this, but I don't have bits designed to fix this type of problem. And the reason I don't, my theory is if I do, then I'll get lazy and I'll start doing this more often. This rarely ever happens, and I'm not bragging on myself, but if I make it easy to fix these mistakes, I'll be more apt to do it more and more again. By doing it this way, making it harder for me to do it, I pay attention. So did some modifications, created a bit, added the bearing, and then I trimmed it on out, and whatever that lip was left, I cut it with a box knife and trimmed that little bit left. Now it's big enough to fit. And this was the reason, or what I was telling you earlier on, that I didn't need to use the C-clamps to get that extra bite, because once I ended up widening the OD of the hole, it took that all out. It eliminated all that stuff, trimmed that little thin area back, so it was pointless. Here I am getting ready to locate and drill out for the speaker terminal. Found my center, and I spaced it based on the depth of my screws so I would not clip those when I drilled this out. Hit it with the nail, so my bit won't walk. Hit it with the hole saw. And we are good to go. I'll set the push terminal in place, pre-drill my holes for it for the screws. Now I'm gonna hit it with a light sand and get all my edges smooth. Except for the top one I won't mess with, because I'm going to be adding the 1/8 inch or the 1/4 inch piece of hardboard for it, so no point in wasting sand in that. Here I am, I roughed it out on my table saw, and I'm going to clamp it into place, put a couple of dry runs of screws in it to hold it in place, and I'm going to hit it with my round or my flush trim bit. Sorry about that. And once I get that right, then I'll remove it, and I'll do the same thing I did with the box, finding my center. So the acrylic piece that I will cut into place here will be perfectly center. What I do is measure half the distance to one side of the line, the other half to the other side. Now I need to put my roundovers on the edges, pull an old terminal cup from a pre-existing box. If you remember this, you've been with me for a minute. Still got that box in the shop. So now I can get my rounded edges, trace them, erase some lines, and get it how I wanted it. Make sure everything was centered up nicely. And I'll go ahead and add some scrap pieces, some double face tape, make my outline template, box everything in. And again, this is that double face tape that I get from Walmart. Pretty cheap, but it does the job, and it's a thin layer so it doesn't rock or shift when you put pressure on it. Drill out some access holes with my step-up bit, rough the main part out with my jigsaw, then set up my little router table with a flush trim bit and get all my edges smooth. After I got this done, I went ahead and popped those loose, pulled the tape off, and now I can start working on my corners. Just freehand those, take my time. Anything that was off or misaligned, I hit it with the little sanding block. Then I took the flush trim bit out of my router bench and put that little rabbit bit in there. Here I am checking the depth, because I'm using acrylic. I'm using 2 pieces of fabric, one on the bottom, one on the top, make sure my depth is correct. Don't want to cut it too shallow, and I don't want to cut too much. Once I got it how I wanted it, hit it one time. Now I'm readjusting the depth for the top piece that I'll just be tucking fabric into, so it doesn't need to be as deep. Hit it on the front and both left and right side. Now I can go ahead and get ready to start cutting this acrylic out, which I always cut it on the table saw, same blade that I cut all my material with. Just take my time, don't rush it, and then it doesn't chip out or anything. A couple of test fits, drops into place, so I am ready to roll. Cleaned off the area, got my fabric ready. The 1-inch screws I'm using here were a little too long, so I'll put them on the grinder and get them to the right length. Hit both surfaces with some spray adhesive. Attach the fabric into place. Set my hardboard outline over the top of it. Marked it with a marker, and then I cut everything out with a box knife. Now I'm going ahead and remove the back film protector of the acrylic that'll be placed up against the fabric. Cleaned everything off, added some glue where it was needed. Put the hardboard into place and position my screws accordingly. Hold it into place. Not a lot of pressure is going to be on here, so spacing was not too critical. Then I took that same sanding block and just knocked off those sharp edges on the box. Here I'm lining up the subs, making sure I get everything even so I can pre-drill all my mounting holes. Just help to get a visual, getting them all into place versus doing one at a time. A little more light sanding around the edges. The tops and the bottom corners aren't perfect, where my router kind of walked a little bit when I was cutting everything out that second time, but you won't notice it once it gets wrapped. Now I can go ahead and start wrapping on the top piece. Same process, Spraying both surfaces with that 2-point contact. Let it set for about 60 seconds. Rub it into place. Took my little tucking tool and tucked it around those gaps that I cut on that router table with that rabbit bit. Now I'll start working the acrylic area. Trimmed it back, same process. Just taking my time with it, forcing it up under that little gap that I cut in there with that rabbiting bit. Cleaned everything away. Now I'll go ahead and I think I'm going to start on the wrapping the rest of the box next. Yes, got it right. Marked off with some paper so we can get overspray on the fabric that's already down. That's what those pieces are in there for. And just repeat your process. Rub everything down smooth. Trim a little bit back on the edges and tuck it in that gap. And this fabric with no backing and thin, it can be a little long. It'll still tuck in there and it won't protrude and cause the board to warp. Trim everything loose on the bottom. Get everything to cut, and I'll come back and hit it with some staples later. Now I'll go ahead and start working these subwoofer holes. Cut these to relieve some of the tension, and I just rub them down into place, starting from the top and working my way down. Here I'm showing you. Start at the top, work your way down. If you start let the fabric touch the bottom surface where the sub mounts, it won't stretch. So you gotta lift it up and then work it down. And this stuff, like I said, with no backing, it stretches for days. Rubbed in smooth, then I'll take my razor blade, holding it about a 90-degree angle, making sure you got the blade extended a lot further than you need, just so you can get a smoother cut. And just walk it all the way around. Now I'll go ahead and start getting ready to get them wired up using some 12-gauge OFC. I'm gonna slid this picture in here just so you can get a visual and know I was telling the truth. Disassembled the speaker terminal. Clipped off those little push-on connectors. I went ahead and connected some eye connections on my wire and reassembled it. And that's how I upgrade all my speaker terminals. Pretty straightforward. Got a couple slits in the fabric, and I didn't trim this out like the speakers because that extra fabric will get it a little tighter on the inside when I get to mounting it. Found my holes, punched with that little screwdriver, and then screwed them into place. There I went back and stapled them just to secure, just in case the fabric tries to lift over time. It may not, but that added security always helps. Speaker wires cut and ran, pushed through the holes, and here we go. We can get ready to start mounting these bad boys. I put a quick tape on it for you just to show you. I don't think I did it earlier. That way you can actually see the OD, the mounting depth of these subs. Very well built. For the price, you cannot go wrong. I couldn't believe that these are priced the way they are, sold in pairs. I will definitely look forward to using these again in some of either my future builds or hopefully some of my other customers will grab some. Started wiring from the left to the right. Wiring positive, positive, negative, negative, all the way through. And then I always cut my wires a little longer and then push them back flat down, just so I know I got a good solid connection and it's not touching the basket. Same process. Start lining up my screws, finding my holes. Set your clutch on your drill to as low as you can. Run them in. It's like you're putting on tires and taking them off, crisscross. Once you get them all sunk down, then you go back and manually tighten them. That way you ensure you do not strip out your screws. All right. Starting to look like something. Oh yeah, I like this. Now we'll go ahead and remove the top layer off this acrylic, the protective coating. Peeled off what I could, and then I used my tucking tool and tucked the little scraggler pieces back in there. I'll tell you what, this thing is ready for some decals. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to show you this, y'all. Always check your own final ohm load. I did it, but I forgot I took it out of sequence. That's why that one came in like that. Cleaned it up a little bit. Here we go. Put the finishing touches on it. Get everything centered up best I can. Eyeballed it, put tape on it on the sides, eyeballed it on the top and bottom. And then I removed half of it because I'm going to install it from top to bottom versus left to right. It's just a lot easier to make sure everything is even. Get it rubbed into place, and then I'll lift it up and remove that bottom section and continue rubbing down. Not a lot of force. And I usually grab a dry rag or towel and do the final rub down over the entire decal before I remove that last protective coating. Oh yeah, looking good. But you know what? It's missing something. It's missing that 210 touch. So this is what we're gonna do. I had a couple of decals made, and I'm gonna overlap them and offset them just a little bit to give it some depth, give it some dimension to it. Same process that I did on the first one, but it's just shifted just a little bit, rubbed everything down into place. You ready to move that protective coating off? Yeah, that was I'm glad I decided to do that. It gave it some depth. Creation on the fly. Wasn't planned, but I love the way it came out. Shout out to Functions Urban Street Gear. My man Chauncey and his wife Tiffany did an amazing job with these decals and shirts. Thank you, thank you. Now this I'm using as a mock-up. This is a work truck of mine. Same dimensions in the back. This is an 08. Customer has an 05. Same setup. You have to remove these little hinge pieces, and it's just broken into two pieces here. These are 10mm bolts. There's 4 on this one and there's 2 on the other one that's on the passenger side. I'll show you those right there. Those just come straight out, and the box will sit on those little metal brackets up against the back wall, and then the back seat, once it's pushed and locked into place, it holds the box solid. It will not move. It doesn't shift. I just wanted to show you a quick mock-up. That's why I flush trim them. For that reason right there, to give you as much clearance as you can possibly get to help prevent the subwoofer rub against the back seat. That's another one in the books. Thanks for watching, and on to the next one.